Hey, it's Sam. I'm here in West Village in New York, spending some time with my guru Amma, just taking a little break between programs to talk about the upcoming Mercury Retrograde. Excuse me. Mercury's going to go retrograde on July 14th, and it'll be retrograde until August 8th. And so, when Mercury goes retrograde, it's, of course, very maligned. This placement is where, especially a lot of astrological novices tend to go off about all the problems in their life when Mercury goes retrograde. But it's actually one of those things where eventually we can really learn a lot about our mental process, about our sense of discrimination, about how we communicate, and all kinds of things. Because it's really what happens when a planet goes retrograde is it just tends to back up relative to our life, which is moving forward all the time. That means our world of time and actions, activities is always moving forward. We go forward and backward in many other dimensions, like in the emotional dimension, in the mental dimension. We can reflect on the past, we can project into the future. All those things are possible, but through form, which means in a body, in the world of time, it only moves forward, it moves one direction. There's a moment where we enter the wheel of time, and then that process it just moves forward toward the moment when our mortal coil is shed. And, our life is like a wave that rises and then falls and then returns back to the source. So what happens when a planet goes retrograde is that function of linear time and the actions that are happening on Earth start to become confusing, because each one of the planets actually produce something, some form. Mercury is the speaker, the speech giver. I almost got hit by a car here. I am paying very close attention though. Mercury is the speech giver, the speaker, and he rules those things. He brings them into form. And also relative to whichever house he rules from your ascending sign, like for instance, if you're Aries, Mercury rules the 3rd and the 6th houses. If you're Sagittarius, Mercury rules the 7th and the 10th houses. So those things will also get interrupted when Mercury goes retrograde, because those are the things the planet produces. The planets produce things just by their general nature, which is called as a karaka, as an indicator. And then they also produce things as a house ruler based on whatever the rising sign is. So regardless of how it works for you, and of course for my gold members, I'm going to make another video that talks about each of their signs. So if you're not a gold member of my site, then you can do that, and you can see how the Mercury retrograde will affect you specifically. But just in general, it's going to interrupt the things that it normally produces, so that we'll reflect upon them and gain greater clarity and insight. This is what happens. We can say, oh, it interrupts it, so that's bad. You have to realize nothing's bad in astrology or in life. What happens is when the external ease of something gets interrupted, it creates an internal focus. It creates an internal necessity. And it's those moments when our certainty with how to operate with something externally screws up that we actually learn. And this is what we get with a retrograde planet when it's in a natal chart. Like when someone has a natal planet retrograde, then that becomes an issue in their life. Like if Venus is retrograde, then Venus is the karaka, the indicator of romantic relationships, but then it'll also rule houses in the chart. So I did a whole bunch of readings on retrograde planets, and I've done a lot of courses on them as well, which you could also look at, where I go into these things in great detail, more detail than I've ever seen, honestly. But when those things get interrupted, it causes us to reflect. It's similar to when, I use the example of like if you come home and you go to put the key in the lock of your door, 99 times out of 100, you put the key in the lock, and it goes in, and you don't even really look at it, you just kind of mechanically take it out and stick it in, and you open the door. Mercury retrograde is kind of like the key doesn't work. And then you have to carefully examine it. Any retrograde planet brings this careful examination of the thing because of its retrograde interruption. What it does is it creates an introspection. You can literally think about it like it's not moving as fast as the rest of our life. Our life moves at a certain speed, and the retrograde planet isn't quite keeping up at that time. And sometimes people say, oh well, the retrograde, it's just an illusion, don't pay that much attention to it. It sort of goes one way or the other. Sometimes people just kind of dismiss it. It's not an illusion. Now the planet's not actually moving backwards, but relative to where we are, it's moving backwards. And again, you can look at this as, let's say that you're going somewhere, you're driving in a car, and you're going with other people, and they're in another car, and you're driving a lot faster than they are, and their car just isn't fast enough, it just doesn't keep up. Well, it's not like they're actually moving backwards, but you're going to have to keep slowing down and going back to make sure that they're keeping up with what you're doing. And this is what the retrograde planet is. That's a pretty good analogy. It's not actually moving backwards, but it's not keeping up with the pace of your life. So things will start to suddenly you'll have to slow down, back up, pay attention to what you say, pay attention to what others say, pay attention to what you communicate. It's in a general sense. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be bad, because paying more attention to Mercury things is really actually a good thing to do. That means paying more attention to what we say, paying more attention to listening to others as well. Communication is not just what we say, hello, big Mercury lesson. It's also listening to what others say and then adjusting. And this Mercury retrograde is going to take place in the sign of Cancer. So that's what's quite important here as well, is, whichever sign the planet goes retrograde in is important. Mercury in Cancer is not exactly, very dignified, is the word. Because, Cancer is a sign of feelings, moods, emotions. And Mercury is about discrimination. It's about, like I said, flexibility, humor. Now, of course, it's getting loud over there. Of course, there are all kinds of emotions and feelings, but, the emotions unify everything. The emotions in our heart is to unify and integrate things. And Mercury is about distinguishing things and, about distinction. So usually when Mercury's in water signs, it's kind of difficult. In Cancer, it's excessively emotional. So it's like, how objective are you, and how easily do you adjust to things when you're all emotional about things that you're really emotional about, like your family? How much discrimination and clarity and flexibility, humor do you have around your family? Let's just say that doesn't mean you might not get along with them, but you're pretty locked into a kind of emotional pattern. It's easy to just be in that. This is kind of a good way to look at Mercury in Cancer, that sort of feeling. It's a water sign that has its own kind of agenda to want to blur all the distinctions and feel that pulse of unified flow and love, rather than focus on the details of what someone said and then adjust and all that. So Mercury in Cancer is already not a very easy retrograde place because of this difference. Mercury in water and fire signs is not necessarily so easy because it doesn't facilitate Mercury's work. So this is a quick overview of retrograde planets, Mercury retrograde in Cancer. And again, like I said, I have a member site where people also get these forecasts more focused toward their sign. Like for my gold members who are Aries, they'll get a much more comprehensive explanation of how this is going to affect Aries based on Mercury, based on the houses Mercury rules, based on Cancer. So I'll synthesize those things for all 12 of the signs. If you're not a member, you can go ahead and follow a button and sign up for a 2-week trial and hear your forecast now, and then also keep moving forward with it if you like.